The one thing that unites us all as Americans is that we do want a cleaner, safer, and healthier environment. The good news is, in America, the ingenuity that we've had, when we unshackle that, we're able to make that all happen. Now, the one thing we have to know is when I talk about what we've been able to unshackle and do, sometimes people in the room are a little too young and don't remember what things looked like in the past. If you look past where LA looked before and where it looks today, technology allows us to do so much and actually have something much cleaner. But the other thing we don't remember much either is in America. I remember this time as a child, I wanted to go visit my grandmother in LA. And my father said we could not go. Not because we didn't have the time off, because our license plate ended in an even number and they were only giving us gas in odd numbers that day. That wasn't that long ago. It was in my childhood that all happened. But something different has happened in today's world. With everything that's happening in the Middle East, with what Iran is doing and others, look at the price. It's not affecting us. Why? Because the ingenuity in America that we're becoming energy independent. That not only makes America stronger, it makes the environment safer and cleaner. And later on, you're going to see quite a bit of this that actually Garrett will bring out as well with the rest of the world of what we're able to do. Our biggest concern is that the left has actually ignored these facts. If we want to solve this problem, their idea of greater control is going to give us a worse scenario. Their whole idea is to control and command is what actually equals a Green New Deal. That does not make us cleaner, that does not make us safer. It has a nice title, but it also harms the environment overall, because one thing that it does do, it gives China a free pass to be dirtier. And we know that from the world point of view, that it's bad for the entire environment. If you want to look to California for a solution, it's not going to solve our problem, it's going to make it worse. Look today at what California taking a Green New Deal approach, where the control and demand, the mandates what they bring. In California today, we pay 40% more in our energy cost. It harms the lower class. In fact, you have found it almost becomes a civil rights. More than 200, a coalition of civil rights leaders has sent a letter to the governor of how their climate proposal has actually harmed individuals inside the state of California. And we know there's a better plan and a better option to make this all happen. So we take it into three major principles, and these are the segments you'll see that come out. Today we're going to be talking about carbon capture. Later you'll see a set of bills that come out about clean energy, then conservation. This will come out over a time of numbers of where we go. Let me turn it over to Garrett.
Kevin talked about the point that we've got to move forward in a sort of a fact-based, a realistic approach, as opposed to something that may be more emotional. This is really important. This was the Waxman Markey projections right here, done by the EIA, done by the Department of Energy. And this red line shows you the projections that were targeted under that legislation, which was mandatory emissions reductions. Of course, this is what projected emissions, this yellow line, was going to be. Projected was going to increase. Under free market principles, as a result of the work of Congressman Wald and many other members that educated the public and other members of Congress, thankfully Waxman Markey didn't become law. But under free market approaches, we've actually reduced emissions greater than called for under mandatory legislation that would have picked winners and losers. Secondly, and this is very important as well, contrasting from the slide that Leader McCarthy showed with California energy prices. Under Waxman Markey, again, EIA nonpartisan projections showed this is what we're going to happen with energy prices, a clear increase in energy prices under Waxman Markey mandatory emissions reduction legislation. The yellow line here showing how much energy prices were projected without Waxman Markey. Under free market American innovation, we've been able to reduce energy prices from where we started. So Americans are paying lower energy prices. And of course, keep in mind, as the leader indicated, higher energy prices disproportionately affects the poor. Now, you hear folks out there as proponents of Green New Deal and other the sky is falling legislation or proposals, and you see the United States being demonized. The reality is this: the United States is the greatest reducer. We have reduced emissions greater than any other country in the world, and as a matter of fact, the United States has reduced emissions more than the next 12 emissions-reducing countries combined. We are the singular world leader. It's not even close. No one holds a candle. Contrast that with what is happening right now in China. So for every 1 ton of emissions we've reduced in the United States, China has increased by 4 tons. Let's be very clear. Those people that are out there as acting as proponents of the Paris Accords, they are advocating for an increase in emissions which is allowed and facilitated under Paris Accords. The United States, I'll say it again, we have been the global leader in emissions reduction. We've done it under free market principles. We've done it by reducing or while reducing energy costs. Very important. So once again, this is under the Paris Accords and allowed under Paris Accords. You will continue to see this number actually increase from where it is today, which is greater than the cumulative total of the United States, the European Union, and Japan combined. And this will continue to increase through 2030. I'll say it again. Advocates of the Paris Accord are advocating for increased global emissions. Not a problem that can be solved in the United States alone, though our innovation will play a foundational role. They're advocating for an agreement that continues increasing. So the three of the principles that our whole proposal are founded upon. One is innovation and market acceptance, something that clearly we've demonstrated over the last 15 years. We've got to make sure that, that as we move forward, we're not in a scenario like you've seen in California that has triple the energy cost of that of Louisiana. Their kilowatt hour in my home state, the kilowatt hour cost of energy in Louisiana is 1/3 that of the state of California. Secondly, we've got to have an America First energy, environment, and climate strategy based upon our resources and our innovation. We don't need to be exporting, and I'll give you an example. You look at what happened up in Massachusetts, up in the Northeast. They imported, as a result of refusing to build natural gas pipelines to distribute natural gas into that area. They had to burn home heating oil, which has a greater emissions profile. They had to import LNG from Russia to supply the New England area with heating, with energy. And lastly, ensuring that we're doing a nature-based solution, keeping in mind the role of the biogenic role, the role of the natural environment, which is why we think that solutions like 45Q and complements to 45Q, which we're going to get into a little bit more today and in subsequent rollouts. And just in closing, to say this again, this isn't anyone sitting here saying, hey, this is what I think will work, here's what I dream of. This is fact-based, building upon the clear success that the United States has had over the last several years, and I'll say it again, as the singular global leader in energy innovation and in emissions reduction.
We're going to have Greg Walden.
Thank you very much. Good to see you all. I wanted to talk about a couple of things. First of all, the leader mentioned the Green New Deal, and I think we've been trying the Energy and Commerce Committee for some time to have them hold a hearing on the Green New Deal, but they've run away from that faster than Joe Biden ran away from New Hampshire. At the beginning of this Congress, the Republicans got together under my leadership, and we talked about what we were for. We're for innovation, conservation, adaptation, preparation. We believe we have a solid record of leading on all of those fronts. In the prior Congress, we passed a number of bills that became law, signed into law, to do expanded hydro licensing. So we can take irrigation ditches, put them in canals, run them through low-head hydro, and create carbon-free energy and conserve water as well. And do siting projects faster for bigger hydro development. Nuclear waste, as you know, the House passed nuclear waste legislation for Yucca Mountain. I know there's a lot of twists and turns, and as I said earlier, it turns out Nevada gets 2 senators no matter what happens, so we're always going to have that fight, but there's new technology, I know Mr. Schweiker could talk about, off in the future to deal with nuclear waste perhaps, but moreover, we are really focused on innovation in nuclear power, and past legislation became law for small modular nuclear development. There's a company in my state that is a leader in this effort. You think about zero emissions for baseload energy, small modular nuclear holds great promise going forward. We had hearings on the health effects of wildfires, and Mr. Westerman will talk about our Trillion Tree Project to join the world in this effort to sequester carbon and have better forest management and better public health. We have done a lot in this area. We had a showcase earlier this year where we brought in companies that are innovating in this space, in the use of wood products to sequester carbon. Net Power running the world's first emissions-free natural gas plant just outside of Houston. The Integrated Test Center at Basin Electric Power Cooperative near Gillette that's using carbon capture research and examining how they can reduce costs and find new methods to capture carbon and manage carbon. The 45Q tax credit, we put into law and are awaiting IRS regulations on that I know Mr. Wenstrup's going to talk about. I'm going to now yield to the gentleman from West Virginia to talk about his initiative on the Carbon Capture and Utilization Innovation Act, because Mr. McKinley's really led on this effort. Again, we believe fully in the role of innovation here, where we can lead the world in carbon reductions through American ingenuity and innovation. And I would turn it over to Mr. McKinley to talk about that act.
I think Greg and Kevin, if they hit on it right, it's all about carbon capture. If we don't get carbon capture, if we don't achieve that around the world, we're still going to have droughts, wildfires, our coastal communities are still going to be under. So we've got to understand, until the rest of the world, because it's a global issue, until they embrace what we're trying to do, but no one's doing it. We're the only country actually leading this. And I post this. This was in the Financial Times just last fall, where China is now opening up as many new coal-fired power plants in the next 5 years than all of Europe combined. Total. 150-some gigawatts of power is going to come online. So China is not buying into this. You saw the chart, how many more, 5,000 more tons of CO2 emissions they're going to have. So what we have to do is be the leader and show them, demonstrate effectively that our innovation, permitting, and initiatives, incentives will be effective. So what we need to do is be able to do this, and then we can market this to China and India. We're already making a reduction, but we've got to show them effectively what effect it's going to have for them, for China and India to follow, because MIT has already said it makes no difference what America does on lowering emissions and affecting the environment. Until China and India buy into this globally, we've got a problem. So this is what we're trying to do. We're going to do it through innovation, permitting, and incentives. Thank you all.
Let's have Mr. Schweikert, Mr. Wenstrup, Ways and Means, come on up. You guys going together, individually? How do you do it?
All right. And actually, just as a weird aside, for those here who do some writing about carbon sequestration, carbon capture, I would ask you, look up an article, MIT ambient carbon capture. Last October, there was a remarkable crash in the price of both ambient to smokestack type capture. And if it's true what they're saying, they may, in a single technology breakthrough, have cut the price in half from our best technology last October. So it's worth understanding. Look, you know the 45Q, Dr. Wenstrup and the Ways and Means Committee. This is one of the things we had been working on. We're still waiting for some of the regs, but the basic concept of, we now believe we need to make it permanent. The concept of, and it's somewhat bifurcated. You have both the capture side and then the sequestration side. And as we have the proof of concept, we now have the technology disruption, and so you start to walk through where the value is from both actually how you sequester it, if it's in enhanced oil recovery or the local concrete plant. The technology is here. The incentive, I believe, we have right. Now we have to work out the details, and hopefully those rules and regs are about to be here. This is really wonderful, and if it's true there's a technology breakthrough that has just crashed the price, this actually starts being really close to also being in the money. So, Doctor?
I want to talk a little bit about what the Republican solutions with carbon capture provide for America and what we are proposing here. So we want to capture more carbon without reducing jobs, without hurting America's energy sector in any way, without driving up energy costs. And a lot of this involves innovation. And innovators need certainty. They also need sensibility to be able to go out and take care of these types of problems and address them well. So we have some fixes. Because right now, if the credit is temporary, that's no good, because people need long-term certainty to be able to plan. That's what we're providing. Right now, the threshold of carbon capture is too high. It's too high to make it feasible, for the credit to be feasible. It's currently, I think, 100,000 tons of capture. We reduce it to 50,000 tons of capture. And right now the tax credit is too low to incentivize many to invest in the technology. And so that we correct as well. So if we can solve these, the United States can certainly lead the world in technology. We can become this export engine. We've talked about how other countries need to come in line if it's going to make a difference. We can do all we want in the United States, and as the one slide showed, we're doing it, but if the others aren't playing along, it's no good. So this is an opportunity for us to export technology for them to use, and especially in countries that it's going to be quite some time before they aren't as reliant on fossil fuels. So what we're doing here is keeping the economy strong, strengthening it even more, empowering the private sector, empowering innovation, and most importantly in this conversation is improving the environment. Thanks.
Mr. Crenshaw? We've heard that we need solutions to make a friendlier permitting environment and create the right incentives for this kind of technology. We also want to invest directly in the technology, and that's what the new energy frontier really is. And let's revisit why we're doing this. If we look at the next 20 years, we have a 25 to 30% increase in demand for global energy. We also don't want to be poor. We want to keep our economy going. So how do we do that plus reduce emissions? We've been told there's this false choice between doing nothing and over-regulating the economy and taxing and pricing carbon emissions, all right? Which of course would only affect the United States and therefore only 15% of global emissions. There's a third option, which is the innovation option. My bill, the New Energy Frontier, does just that. So we look at pilot programs for carbon capture for natural gas plants specifically. This isn't science fiction at all. There's actually plants just outside Houston that do this. Net Power was mentioned before. Net Power powers 5,000 homes, takes in natural gas, and recycles that carbon dioxide right back through the plant, has zero emissions. Petronova, also just outside of Houston, a coal plant, takes the equivalent of 350,000 cars off the road every single day. So how do we scale that out? This plan would actually invest in pilot programs and R&D that do just that, $50 million a year. The next part of this plan is thinking ahead into the future. What do we do with the carbon dioxide once we've actually captured it? All right, so what do we need? We need a carbon innovation hub centered around DOE, which would actually take the best minds from our universities, our commercial industry, the nonprofit sector, and our national labs, and understand how we can turn this into a commodity, not just a waste product. That's how we have to think about it. And again, this is not science fiction. It's already used for enhanced oil recovery. That's what Petronova already does with its carbon dioxide. Uses it for enhanced oil recovery, which is 40% less carbon intensive than normal oil recovery. All right? Using it for cement mixing was talked about earlier. There's other really interesting innovations out there. For instance, using biological processes to get the carbon out of the CO2, which then we can turn into energy. Really interesting stuff out there. That's what this kind of innovation would fund.
Well, this is exciting when you think about all the innovation, and the future is really what we can imagine it to be in this area with carbon capture, with reducing the amount of carbon that is released from man-made activities. But I want to talk about an old technology, an old friend that we have, something that's done a great job at sequestering carbon since it's been around, and that's a plant cell, and it's a tree. And we have tremendous opportunities with trees. They're more abundant, they're more economical, and they're the best tool that we have to take existing atmospheric carbon out of the atmosphere. We're at 411 parts per million in the atmosphere now. Before the Industrial Revolution, we'd never gotten above 300 parts per million. The Trillion Trees Act is about planting trees, but it's about a whole lot more than just planting trees. We're going to do our part in leading the globe in planting 1 trillion trees by 2050. There's places where there's deforestation where we can stop that and plant more trees and help the whole world out. We'll do our part at home. But our part at home is a lot more than just planting trees. It's utilizing the full abilities of sustainable forestry. And that's planting trees where we can plant them, but growing more wood on our existing forest land. And ultimately, we want to store more of that carbon. And the tree not only pulls carbon out of the atmosphere, but it stores it in the wood, and when we use that wood in sustainable building, it's stored there for as long as the building's there. This table is 40 to 50% by weight carbon, and this is carbon that was pulled out of the atmosphere possibly centuries ago. And we can utilize that to do a whole lot more than just store wood in the forest. We've got to do more than just store wood in the forest. And by using sustainable building, we also reduce the amount of carbon that goes into the atmosphere by using sustainable building materials, by making buildings more energy efficient, and then having that carbon stored there for the long run. So I'm excited to file the Trillion Trees Act. I say it's an old solution to a new problem, and again, it's the most effective and proven method that we have to take carbon out of the atmosphere and use it to our benefit.